Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I can't really add to the words of my colleague, the Honourable Member for the Vale of Clwyd, and his praise for the impact of this budget in North Wales. So I would perhaps just draw one example before I turn to some of the contributions we've heard from the opposition in this debate, and that is the Wild Horse Brewing Company in Llandudno. They make my favourite drink, the IPA, and they, for one, have already been talking about the impact for them on the small producer relief in the budget. It's just one small thing, but it's an illustration of how this budget has reached, if you'll excuse me, into parts where other budgets have not reached before. Mr Deputy Speaker, Aberconwy is a place that has been hit first, hardest and longest by the pandemic, and it's the Chancellor's typical awareness of that and sensitivity to that in the support package he received and now in the budget that he's brought forward that we saw in evidence last week, and I take this opportunity to thank him for that. But this is a debate, and I've listened carefully to what the opposition have offered as an alternative, and three words have come through. The member for Croydon North actually talked about radical devolution and investment, and the member for Selly Oak and many others talked about growth. And I thought to myself, well, what would these look like then under a Labour government? And I thought, in Wales, we know exactly what these look like. After 2 decades, radical devolution in Wales has resulted in the centralisation of powers to Cardiff. For example, European structural funds. Just 9% of those are decided by the local authorities, compared to, in England, 36% of those being decided. This budget has demonstrated the UK government trusts local authorities. It's for all parts of the UK. Secondly, investment. Well, although Wales has just 3% of the UK's population, before devolution it enjoyed over 5% of the UK's inward investment. After 2 decades, that is now closer to 1% of the UK's inward investment. It has collapsed under the care and attention of that Labour government in Cardiff. And to the third point, Mr Deputy Speaker, of growth. We've heard this mentioned several times, and so I was particularly interested in that. But again in Wales, at the start of that period of devolution, somewhere in the region of 20,000 jobs a year were being created by that inward investment. And what we find now, it's closer to 5,000 jobs per year. It has collapsed under Labour administration. Mr Deputy Speaker, this government has invested in research and development. It has promised £2 billion extra through this budget, and I welcome that. I welcome the insight which has come with them saying, let's not take things as they are, let us make them different. Let us see how we need to do things faster, like the introduction of the taper relief. Let us see how we need to do things differently, like investing in research and development. But if I use these last moments, Mr Speaker, to speak on something which, Mr Deputy Speaker, which I think we can all agree on, and actually these are words of wisdom from the King's Road in Llandudno. And these are this. It was one of the residents there last summer who said to me, as we talked over the garden wall, someone will have to pay for this. So I really welcome, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor's words at the end of his budget when he said that we're moving towards a small state, low-tax economy. When he said that we must move away from being a society where government is the first resort for every problem that happens. That's what my conservatism is to me, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome that and I welcome this budget.
Yay.